Hey everyone, we're back with Generation What? Today, we are focusing on communication across generations. So, in order to properly communicate, you need to understand the preferences of the 5 generations in the workplace. Let's get started. Number 1, the traditionalists will be the oldest members in your workplace right now, but that's not to mean that we should be disregarding their preferences for communication. They're all about face-to-face communication. In fact, if they don't receive that face-to-face communication, they feel disrespected. So make a note of that and make sure that you are communicating any really important information face-to-face with your traditionalist members. Next up, we got boomers. Now, boomers are really good at face-to-face, but they actually prefer phone calls. So if you're going to talk to a boomer, call them up. I've had many experiences with this when I know I have to call a boomer, even though as a millennial, I hate phone calls so much, but I just suck it up and I do it because that's what you got to do. Next, we have Gen X. Now, Gen X, they prefer emailing. And especially when you are trying to schedule a meeting, don't schedule a meeting unless it's something that cannot be determined over email. You can just shoot a couple paragraph email to them, do that because that's preferred versus phone calls, meeting in person, texting, any of that. So keep that in mind when you're talking to Gen X. We have a very email-oriented generation. Millennials, my generation. So we are afraid of the phone. Please try not to call us as much as possible. Millennials really prefer texting as the most efficient way to communicate with them. It kind of bypasses all of the, hello, how are you? How's the weather outside? Formalities that you need to do over a phone call. Get straight to the point with the text message. As far as Gen Z, we got the Gen Zers coming up in the workplace right now. They're the youngest members that are going to be in your workplace or organization. So Gen Zers are surprisingly interested in face-to-face communication. However, if that's not possible, they do enjoy a text now and again. If you can't communicate with them that way, even social media is a great way to communicate them. DM them on Instagram, shoot them a Snapchat. I'm not kidding you guys. This is the most effective way to communicate with this generation. I have groups of high school clubs for my nonprofit, and they actually have group Snapchats, and that's the way that they get information across for their club meetings and events. It blows my mind, but that's how they're doing it. Now, as a leader, you need to fully understand all of these methods of communication and use each one when trying to communicate effectively with that generation. Of course, your job can also be kind of building bridges between these communication methods. There are various platforms to do multiple communication methods like Skype, Zoom, Slack. All of these incorporate video, phone call, face-to-face, and chat. So that's really helpful for accommodating all of your generations in the workplace. I recently had a Gen Zer who was texting me because she was frustrated that she wasn't hearing back from someone who was a boomer. And so I ended up having to call that boomer, of course, on the phone, and they told me that she had texted them past 5 p.m., so they weren't going to reply. So keep in mind, as a leader, it's your job to kind of be bridging these gaps and making sure your younger generations understand that some older generations need those boundaries. They're not going to be able to reply to those texts because that's when they're at home and they don't want to be associating with work at that point. Me as a millennial and her as a Gen Zer, we don't really understand that because we are always on, we're always texting, there's not really any boundaries for us on that level. So that sums up the 5 generations in the workplace, and I trust that you got some information about how to best communicate with each generation, and as a leader, your job is to kind of know all of these different communication methods and be able to bridge those gaps between your generations. Thanks for tuning in to the communication edition of Generation What? See you next time. Generation What is out.